Hello, and welcome back to Story Planet Podcasts with me, your host, Jack Cole. So today I'm joined by Evan Berry. So, Evan, welcome. And you start by telling us a little bit about your background and what it is that you do.
Hello, thank you, Jack, for that welcome. So, bit about me. At the minute, I'm working as a lecturer in animal management, animal care and science. I think the actual title is at Hoffel College, so it's under East Durham College in Northeast England. And I teach predominantly level ones, which leads in quite nicely to what else I'm doing and kind of the broader topic of the podcast in general. Wherein a nice thing that we can do with the level one students is because a lot of these students kind of are coming into the animal field completely fresh with no preconceived notions about anything. A lot of them are very kind of disillusioned with the education system. And I found it really rewarding to get them into kind of biodiversity stewardship, getting them into bugs, pitfall trapping with a bunch of like 16, 17-year-olds is fantastic and not something that I ever expected myself to end up doing. But that kind of all stems back from me, significantly younger, kind of 4 or 5 years old. I just had a fish tank full of bugs and dirt and leaves that I found in the garden. And kind of I never really grew out of just lifting things up, which is a bit reductive, but my favorite kind of, I guess, ecological surveying is just picking things up. Still now, my poor partner Stacey will go for a walk. We'll take the dog for a walk, and we'll stop 10 to 15 times on the way for me to lift up a plant pot or lift up a piece of wood and go, "Oh, cool! Look at these isopods." But I think people, especially invertebrate conservation, I think you really need that kind of passion to come across, because a lot of the kind of the heads of invertebrate societies and things like that are generally very old school, very scientific and by the book, and I guess white collar. And I think it's just nice to do it from the other side, doing it from the ground up as opposed to the top down. But yeah, so that then led me, the lifting things up thing led me all the way to doing, so I mean, through school, not a fantastic story, similar story to some of the students that I teach. I'm not an academic person by any stretch of the word, struggled all the way through school. Joined university, so that's when I mean, and I scraped in by every stretch of that word. So got into university, did my degree in animal management and conservation. I don't know how I almost forgot that. Seems an important thing to remember. And that was at the University of Cumbria. And that just, yeah, that has kind of now snowballed into here. Following that, I worked in Kirkley Hall Zoological Gardens. I worked in Potter's World in Lanchester, so two different zoological institutions, and I was working with kind of lower vertebrates and invertebrates there. Then, of course, I'm sure everyone would like to forget, but the country stopped doing things for a year to 2 years, at which point I was made redundant. You know, what happens? And then following that, ended up in Pets at Home, which was, again, very different. But even through that, I think that was where I really started developing that passion for talking to people, because I don't know, it's just the conversations that you have with complete strangers. And I would take these complete strangers, and so say they want a fish tank, I'd take these complete strangers, and then it's like, cool, let's talk about where in Peru Corridora species are from. You know, and I love the back and forth and the conversation, and that has now kind of led me to where I am, I think. Because it was definitely while I was there that I was like, you know what, I really like talking to people about stuff. Everyone that
Fantastic.
knows me will say the same thing, but yeah, that's a whistle stop tour of me.
Yeah. Well, speaking of whistle-stop tours, I was going to ask, can you give us a bit of an overview of some of the species that we have in the UK, sort of the state that they're in,
Yeah.
where to find them, climates, that sort of stuff?
Uh-huh. So of course, so if you're ever wanting really in-depth information on this sort of stuff, Bug Life are a fantastic organization that tend to publish a lot of statistics about it. So a recent one that it was a document that they'd sent to the government that was taken to them. It was discussed in Parliament, and they were talking about how roughly 64% of all of the species of any animal, excuse me, in the UK are invertebrates. So that's everything from crabs, crustaceans, isopods, slugs, snails, etc. But the state of them in general is improving, but still on a downward trend. So it's it's flattened a little bit. Yeah.
Right.
So definitely still on a downward trend, generally through overmanagement of things like farmland, human encroachment onto areas where they are. So, I mean, one of the most charismatic species that I've come across was the tansy beetle. It's only found on something like a 26-mile stretch of the Ouse, and that's it, the River Ouse. But Ask and Brian have started managing that. They've been talking about it recently a lot on social media. Everybody should go and find out about them because they're fantastic. They don't look like they belong in this country. I think everyone thinks of invertebrates in this country as just dreary brown drab things. But these look very similar to like your African flower beetles. They're bright green, iridescent, fantastic looking. I mean, the species of it's again not 100% my kind of domain, but Lepidoptera species, so your butterflies and moths in this country, fantastic diversity. A lot of them are starting to improve now, just because of kind of farmers introducing flower margins and kind of focusing on biodiversity net gain, which is nice because it just means that they need that kind of unmanaged space. Your wildflower meadows, they're really, really important ecosystems, really important biomes, I guess, that a lot of invertebrate species rely on. And I think the main thing is, although some people might find it difficult to justify, obviously, and lots of people, like we were talking about, people get freaked out by invertebrates if it's a legs or antenna or just because they're small and fast. But without those, we'd have nothing. Without the invertebrates we have in this country, we wouldn't have all the fantastic flora that we have in this country. Without invertebrates in this country, you go to Scarfell Pike. It's like, I decide I'll have a little walk up this mountain. You're having a walk up and you start noticing that there's carcasses everywhere and poo everywhere. Without invertebrates, that's what would happen. Well, I mean, we wouldn't be breathing the air because there'd be no plants, there'd be no pollinated plants, there'd be no oxygen. It's a very they're the absolute building block of us being here. Without invertebrates, there'd be nothing. And I just think we owe some respect back to them.
Of course.
But
And in terms of a little bit of the ecology there, unpacking it a little bit, is that they're so important because they're pollinators,
yeah,
because they're food, bit of both, bit of a mixture.
mm-hmm.
What are some of the other roles that they play?
I mean, those you've hit the big two, pollinators and food. But I mean, you've made me draw a blank. Again, main two. But things like just breaking down detritus, like I was talking about before, the absolute state that the Earth would be in if you didn't have lovely detritivores like your earthworms and your really small your rove beetles, your isopods. That's a one that I really, really hammer into the kids. We talk about myriapods and isopods constantly because these are tiny little crustaceans with a bunch of legs. Obviously, isopods generally referred to as woodlice
Woodlice,
for the
right?
layman. Yep.
Right, of course. I was trying. Yeah. There we go.
Sorry,
No,
I should
you,
have probably
you,
specified that earlier.
no, absolutely fine.
But again, the disrepair that the world would be in without things like that is immeasurable. There are more species of just things like rove beetles, isopods, than they are of every species of like whole taxa. There are more rove beetles than there are. I think there are more rove beetles. So is it something like 900,000 species of rove beetle? Don't quote me 100% on that because I'm not 100%, but and these are predominantly little long beetle. Well, I say long. I mean they're tiny, a lot of them, but they've got these big, long, slender bodies. They don't look like a beetle. They look like some sort of they look like an in between of the larval stage and the adult stage of a beetle that you'd normally see. But just something as insignificant as that is stopping other invertebrates from getting out of control. It's all about the population dynamics. Obviously, that's a big thing in ecology. Like for example, when I was surveying recently, I was doing some surveys just pitfall trapping in some like kind of farmy scrubland.
Very, very quickly, Evan, just
Oh,
to
sorry, go
explain a
ahead.
little bit further, pitfall
Hmm.
trapping, as I understand it, is that when you dig a little trench, put a cup in? Is that
Yeah,
is
yeah.
that basically
It's
it?
it's extraordinarily simple.
Right.
It sounds like I don't know something that John Rambo would do, but it's
Okay.
it's it's literally hole, bucket,
Right.
lid. But you suspend the lid a little bit up so that things can still climb into it.
Right. Right.
Um, but yes, pitfall trapping. We've been finding things like giant crane fly larvae, which I don't know if you've ever seen them. They get called leather jackets. They are
Right.
the sort of thing that I would expect most people to be extremely squeamish about. Um, but the fact that they are in actually relatively small numbers would suggest that some other species might then be bouncing back. But a lot of these pitfall traps had a lot of your ground dwelling spiders in. So I mean, they're the things that are responsible for stopping, I don't know, fungus gnat larvae and things like that from getting out of hand. The things that people think are pests.
Mm.
Um, but yes, and again, just being able to demonstrate that justification, the kind of the contextualizing their worth to 16, 17-year-olds is, I feel like it's a very important thing to do. The ecological role of invertebrates is, I mean, I'm, if anything, I'm drastically underselling it because what don't they do? What there'd be nothing without them. You have to, like you're saying, food, pollinators, everything.
Of course. And you mentioned there the sort of potential for imbalances between certain species populations. And
Hmm.
obviously, we spoke about beforehand, you find mammals a little bit boring, which is absolutely fine, of course.
Yes, well,
But for example, there's some discussion about bringing back sort of wolves or certain predator species, such as lynx
uh,
and things, to help control deer populations because there's too
yeah.
much deer, there's overgrazing, etc.
Hmm.
And on more of the sort of that micro invertebrate level, what are some of the imbalances that could happen? For example, what would be some equivalent, funny thing to say, but equivalent of deer overpopulation wiping out something or hugely damaging one environment? What are some of the kind of the examples of that
I
in
mean,
the
a
invertebrate world?
really good coastal example that isn't seen a lot of places in this country, but we do have some kelp forest. Is things like your sea urchins, which
All right.
obviously they're still an invertebrate. Yes, they're a wet invertebrate, but they're still an invertebrate. Um, but things like that, population dynamics of those, they get out of hand, they destroy the kelp forest. All of a sudden, the tides are changed, even just slightly. The tide changing obviously then changes the erosion map kind of the beaches. I don't remember the exact word for that because again, I'm not a geologist. But
Geographer.
the kind of the yeah, the erosion of the beaches then changes drastically, which then means all these lovely coastal houses that we've built now all of a sudden aren't sustainable to be there anymore. It's somewhere there's just been a big one in an American state, and I don't remember which one, where they'd kind of made their own sand dunes. The people of this residential area had made their own sand dunes with kind of in accordance with the with local government and built these sand dunes, excuse me, right next to the houses. And because there was no grasses in them, there was no like kind of the longer rooted grasses that you tend to find in sand dunes. There was a big storm and they all washed away, all gone. Every single one of them. Something like $300 million worth of sand
Hmm.
gone. Whereas, although it sounds like oh yeah, it's really important we get those plants there. Again, how do you get the plants to kind of continue thriving there if you've got no invertebrates to kind of if you've got no, for example, ground beetles to manage the invertebrates that would break them down and eat them and really hammer them. Um, if you've got none of your your mollusk species that are going to help manage the overgrowth of certain plants, and obviously we'll focus on some and not others. And how are you going to pollinate them? Oh, great! You've gone and planted a bunch of seeds. The seeds are done. Unless these plants self-pollinate, you now need even more invertebrates to come in and do that. So there is a wide range of kind of examples in pretty much every environment. Obviously, I know I've used the United States as an example, but some areas, similar biomes to us, similar ecological diversity. But the other species that people have been kind of talking about bringing back, yes, the mammals are fantastic, but I mean, I've personally been looking at the common tree frog, reintroduction of the common tree frog, which there is one gentleman in Devon whose name eludes me, who's currently trying to bring them back, but there's not a lot of other places doing it. But they used to be, again, a really important invertebrate manager, which then has the knock-on effect of managing the growth of trees and everything like that. So I think the future in general of kind of what we'll do to look at the protected areas in the UK is if we just need more people to talk to each other. We need more people to talk to each other. Like, for example, we'll use, again, where I work as an example, me and the land and wildlife teaching team, which have got a fantastic background. One of the guys that I'm working with at the minute has worked in forestry. He's worked in like horticultural conservation as well. But being able to combine those disciplines makes life significantly easier, and it means that we can move forward with things. The kind of the debate is starting to change. I say the debate, the conversation is starting to change more towards everyone working together. But I think we're a long way away from really achieving that. But organizations such as yourselves are very important for that. You just need more people talking to people talking to people, sorry, as opposed to organizations talking to people, and then organization goes and tells this other person.
What do you think has
Yeah.
been, so you mentioned that a lot of these conversations are opening up. What do you think has been facilitating that? Do you think it's just social media? Do you think, what
I
do
think
you think it
social
is?
media. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was
All
supposed to
right.
say attitudes,
Yeah.
social media. What do you think?
So I think social media is obviously it's a double-edged sword. But social media is a fantastic facilitator to kind of opening the conversation. For example, the only reason I'm here is because you found me on social media, and then now we're having this conversation, which might have an impact. It might not, but the fact of the matter is that connection was made. On the other hand, social media is also like the world's biggest spreader of misinformation. So it's important not to rely too kind of heavily on it. But even just things like I really like the two apps Seek by iNaturalist and iNaturalist, just because it's a really nice way of kind of empowering citizen science. You know, I can pick up my phone, I can go, oh look, I found a bug. I take a photo of it. I put the photo on iNaturalist. It gives me that AI lens thing to try and work out what it is. Maybe it's the right thing, maybe it isn't, but it doesn't matter. It means that this is now being brought to somebody potentially who does know stuff about it. So, for example, we went out with the level 1 students on the last day of term yesterday, looking at bugs, which some of them were happy about, some of them weren't. But who cares? I'm in charge. Um, so, and we were taking photos and putting them on iNaturalist. We found some woodlice. I had ID'd most of them. There was a couple that we didn't 100% know. And literally, one of the students sent me an email today saying, oh, this BMIG guy has identified what it is. And it's obviously the British Myriapod and Isopod group, which is spread across the country. And they have now been able to see this. Maybe it's just a bog standard. Oh, there's no such thing as a bog standard bug, actually. I'll take that back. Maybe it's just, a more common thing, a shiny woodlouse or like a rough woodlouse. But you never know when something like that actually pops up something quite interesting. And all of a sudden now, all this data is ridiculously easy to access. I don't have to go to some sort of Ecology Society, which is what everybody used to do. You go to an ecology group, they do a survey, they make a nice big Excel spreadsheet for you, or they'd put it in a table, give it back to you. Fantastic. Now you can just pick your phone up or turn on the computer. And it's like, oh, well, I can already see all these people that have gone and taken photos of everything. I've already got all this data. Yeah, you might have to check through it a little bit because it's not like totally regulated. But all of a sudden that just, I think that the ease of it has definitely helped to shift the conversation a bit, like you're saying. But also even just the general attitude of the population of the United Kingdom now is a lot more positive towards biodiversity in general. I mean, like you were saying about before, the various rewilding projects that are starting to kind of make their way, especially through Europe and towards us. So obviously, I watched the podcast with Ruta Helmer, which was about a month ago. I can't remember. When he was talking about rewilding in Europe, and then kind of obviously you've seen the Kent beavers, you've got bison in Scotland, all sorts of stuff are coming back. And a great example, actually, literally what I want to say 5 miles down the road from me is where red kites were first reintroduced into England. So at Rowlands Gill, Gibbside, a National Trust place. And even that, the actual, just anecdotally, the actual impact that had was ridiculous. All of the buses in the area were called the Red Kite, whatever number. Yeah, you had the Red Kite 45, had a big red kite on the front. I remember I was at school at the time, and I must have been maybe 7 or 8, and they had a competition about, the school mascot is now a red kite, and we're going to have a competition to name it. Like it's actually absurd to think that happens, and it's just something that's popped back into my head there. But just things like that, like people are starting to actually take ownership and pride in the area that they are. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of kind of the opposite direction where people don't really care. My least favorite mindset that I hear from people at the minute will be, I'll say, oh, for example, why did you throw your cigarette butt on the ground? And somebody will go, oh, well, who cares? Look at it. There's loads of cigarette butts. And it's like, yeah, but why make it worse? And they'll go, oh, well, planet's ruined anyway. I mean, they'll normally use a different word than ruined, but planet's ruined anyways. I can't fix it. I'm not Coca-Cola. What am I going to do about it? But the fact of the matter is, if every single person that has ever said, oh, well, what's the difference in me doing anything? I'm just one person. If every single person then actually did the thing that they were going to do, the world would be a much better place. But yeah, like you say, it's just I think the success stories that are coming out of a lot of places are really, I mean, at the end of the day, people like hearing good news. It's just a fact. I turn on the news, it's like, oh, war, murder, fire, flood. It's like reading the Old Testament. It's just every time you put the news on. But people really like, even if it is just something like when I was saying about the tansy beetle, even if it is just, oh, Askham Bryan College and Hull have found more than they did last year. It's a little thing, but it's like, oh, well, that's quite nice. Or like things like tortoiseshell butterflies coming back. They're not coming back in great numbers. I think they've gone down. I think in 10 years, it's around 75 to 77% of them have just vanished. And then all of a sudden, I mean, I think I saw on LinkedIn the other week, it was just a photo that somebody had taken of one. And it was like, oh, that's nice. That makes me happy. But that sort of thing, then, if it makes me happy, then it's just another way that I can use my passion for what is happening to inspire other people to feel happy about it. And then all of a sudden, because they see that you're really happy about it, it's, oh, well, actually, that is kind of cool.
You mentioned a few minutes ago that the decrease is decreasing, so to speak.
Yeah.
Things aren't getting as bad as they were slowly.
Yeah.
So, and I'm just curious to know a little bit more about the drivers behind that. Why things are slightly picky, well, not getting, as I mentioned,
Not getting,
twister,
slow down.
not getting better, but
Yeah.
things aren't the catastrophe they were. Things seem to be taking a little bit of a plateau.
Uh-huh.
Wondering why that is, what people are doing, and what perhaps ordinary people could do and the rest of it.
Yeah. So, I mean, some fantastic examples. I don't know, where are you based out of interest? Let's try and find one close to you.
Oh, good luck. I'm in Peckham, South London.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, well, in the south, somewhere down there. So you've got things like it's just there's a lot of people trying to reintroduce things,
How
which
about
is
this? We work a lot with Kent, and they just bought
Kent.
Brighton. There we go. There's a good
Okay.
story. There's lots going on
Okay.
down there. Kent's nice, nice and green.
Yeah.
There's deer. There's everything down in
Uh-huh.
Kent. So let's pretend I'm in
So
Kent.
so there is actually one sort of success story, tentatively success story, and I mean there's lots, but one specific one that obviously I've been hearing about is have you ever heard of the wart biter cricket?
I haven't, no.
So essentially, little crusty guy, or crunchy. I normally call them to the students. If it's got an exoskeleton, it's crunchy. If it doesn't, it's squishy. So they've just been reintroduced. Well, I say just in kind of the last year or so. Another population's just been reintroduced in Kent. Again, don't tell me don't kind of quote me on the exact date when it started. I just know that positive things are coming out from that. So it only occurs in I think 4 places in the whole country. So kind of you've got East Sussex, Dorset, Wiltshire, and then I think there was a couple of places in Kent, and another population's just being reintroduced. But they're quite a historical species. I mean, they're called that because people used to use them to bite warts off your skin if you had a skin tag or a wart. They'd use this cricket to chew the wart off, which is a horrifying thing to do. Poor cricket.
Yeah.
I would. Who said it wants to eat wart? Anyway, it's now the wart biter cricket. I think the species name, the Latin name is Decticus. I'm sure the species is verrucivorus, as in it eats verrucas. Yeah, it's a horrible thing to be named after.
Yeah.
But yeah, just one example. The reintroduction projects that are going on are fantastic. One project that I really do like. So I've been, as you might imagine, I keep some invertebrates myself. I keep some kind of exotic invertebrates myself. I go to a lot of invertebrate shows where people will come, they'll do talks, there'll be breeders, what have you, just other people that like bugs, which is nice. I know not everybody believes in kind of the captive keeping of stuff, but I like it as a resource. So a lot of these national invertebrate shows. So I think there's one in London soon, actually, if you fancied going. The Central Invertebrate Show, if you were so inclined. But they always do they always raise money for the fen raft spider every single time they're there. They've always got a fen raft spider kind of fundraising initiative on every single show. And it's because obviously it's one of the most endangered species in the UK, especially within invertebrates. You've got things like that and oil beetles. Tansy beetles used to be an example, New Forest cicadas. But yeah, it's just a nice thing that's happening. Other reintroduction species off the top of my head, I think there was somebody trying to look at bearded false darkling beetles. So that's a New Forest beetle. You find that a lot of the species that we've lost did used to be around kind of the New Forest. So like the cicadas I was talking about, I think no one's seen them since 2000. Nobody's seen a New Forest cicada, but obviously they live in the ground for a long time before they do anything else. Ladybird spiders as well. No, sorry, not ladybird spiders. That's the wrong country. Am I getting that right? I've potentially just forgotten. Yes, ladybird spiders. Yes, that are found in pretty much only one place in the country. We thought it was extinct for 70 years. Found one showed up in 1980, and you can literally, there are so few of them, you can go and count them. Like you right now could go down and count ladybird spiders and be like, okay, right, yeah, that's all of them. I mean, these things are about this big. It's not something that should be happening. But it's just really nice seeing all of the organizations that have started hammering it. Everyone's taken a little bit of a shine to some invertebrates. I think the one that I saw recently, I don't know if I saw it on social media. I don't think it was on the telly, but it was somewhere was the wildlife trusts have started this campaign to kind of ameliorate slugs and snails and just mollusks in general. So they kind of one of my students described it as a slug thirst trap, which is a phrase I've
Of
heard
its
used
time.
about. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It was an interesting one, but yeah, just really, really just shine the light on. No, these things are cool. I'm sorry that your grandma used to throw salt on them, or I don't know if you remember, but my grandparents used to leave beer traps out for them. It was just like a tub of lager, and the slugs would climb in and drown.
Right, yeah, without
Why?
getting anyone who might be listening to too much trouble, I do remember going down the garden, sitting down the garden with some salt
Yeah.
when I was
Oh
a bit
no.
younger.
I mean, you can just finish here if you want. You've upset me now, so no,
Well,
but
things have
but
changed.
that's
I'm doing
yeah,
quite the opposite
exactly.
now, so
That's a fantastic
anyway,
example though.
yeah.
That's it was oh, look at these gross little slimy things. Let's chuck some salt on them. Why?
Mm.
For what purpose? It's like yes, of course there's pest species, but there's so many slugs and snails that are ridiculously important. I mean, I myself when I was doing the surveys I was talking about the other day, I was looking at things like cop snails, your nice white-lipped snails, your spinny ones, garlic snails. Um, I've got some hairy snails that I've got. Well, I say I've got photos. If you look at my camera roll, I don't know if I'll not show it the camera, but it's just photos of bugs. So I've got some photos of hairy snails somewhere on there. Fantastic species. Um, but yeah, it's like you're saying that it's changing. People
Mm.
like stuff. People like bugs and slugs and all that stuff.
And on
It's a nice thing to hear.
yeah, it is. Things are definitely trending, hopefully,
Mm,
in the right direction. And on that, Evan, how do you think things continue, or say continue on a positive trajectory?
mm,
If the kind of the sort of positive energy, especially coming up through younger people more generally,
yeah,
if that sort of continues, how do you like to see things develop? And in terms of from more of an ecological perspective,
yeah,
also obviously focus on invertebrates,
mm,
perhaps even your neck of the woods up north.
yeah,
But how could things be if in a really sort of positive, okay, everything's doing well, what could people be seeing? What could be happen, as I say, ecology wise and
yeah. I mean,
habitat?
the good example that I always try to use with my kids is sound because obviously quite often you can't see things, especially
Mm,
you know
right.
you're walking through the woods. You're gonna have to stand there and trying to get a group of what 13, 14, 15, kind of 16-year-olds to be quiet is not possible. If somebody finds out how to do that, by all means tell me, but I don't know how to do it. So just even things like birdsong, I really like using birdsong as an example because when you've got birdsong, that means you've got birds. If you've got birds, that means there's bugs. If there's bugs, that means we're all right for now.
Mm,
So what I quite like doing is we'll walk into kind of a woody area. I've taken them a few places, and I'll stop them and I'll just go right. We're just going to listen to see what we can hear, and we'll just stand there. And sometimes we'll go places and you don't hear a thing, and people will go, "Oh well, why is that? We've found loads of bugs." I was like, "Correct. We found loads of bugs on the ground in the dirt. What about the flying bugs? How many moths have you seen recently?" That sort of thing. And that's when they start going, oh, actually, yeah, why could I mean bats were another good example that I've always used. The amount of bats has dropped drastically. And that is that you can see that anecdotally so easily. Even like again, to talk about my own family, it was my dad that was telling me the other week, he went, so he always walks the dog at about 10:30 at night time. And he's been taking the dog for a walk. And he said to me on the phone the other day, he went, I don't see bats anymore. I never see bats flying around. And I was like, well, do you ever see moths flying around? He's like, well, I suppose not. It's like, why do you think there's no
mm,
bats?
mm.
Um, but that's a lot to do with light pollution. That's one of the biggest threats facing a lot of your night flying species. Light pollution. There's lights everywhere. It's no longer, oh yeah, I used the light of the moon to look at this. It's now, oh, I'm flying down the A1 and there's street lights everywhere and car lights. And like where I live now, I'm maybe kind of 20-minute drive away from Newcastle, and it's not that urban of an area. It's relatively urban, but it's kind of semi-rural. And I can literally just look out of my window on a nighttime and you see just this aura coming off the city. And it's like, how realistically, as a night flying moth, are you supposed to compete with something that is significantly brighter than the moon that you can see miles away? How like and that's like I've said, it's being able it sucks, but sometimes being able to contextual like kind of justify the existence of a lot of the invertebrates and why we need to protect them. Going for the kind of the charismatic species is the best thing. It's like everybody knows what a bat is, everybody knows what a bird is. Don't have to get that specific.
Mm.
So yeah, that's generally what I'll tend to tell the average person to look for. But also just things like the things that I do in my own garden, lifting things up, looking in cracks. If you're seeing bugs, it's probably a good thing. Obviously, the kind of the amount that you're seeing might be lower, but have you heard of the kind of the splatter way of surveying?
Yes,
Yeah,
on what they call it, car bonnets
yeah,
or the windows.
exactly.
Basically, you put like I was gonna say a quadrat, but like you
Yeah,
measure basically how many splats there are per
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
meter squared or
Splats of
something like that.
insects.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
again, it's a bit morbid, but I literally saw a post. I think it was on the Twitter or something the other week. I saw a post that was literally just a lady saying, um, "Have you ever noticed how you don't see bugs splattered on the window anymore when you drive places? That you never get bugs splattered on anything." I remember going to where was it? I think Caister. Excuse me. I should have muted myself for that.
Absolutely fine.
Sorry, anyone whose ears I've just blasted. Um, but I was going down south for a family holiday, and I remember getting out of the car when we got there, and it did make me sad. But there was all across the grill of the car were just bug splats all over it. Now I did a very similar journey with my family, going to I think it was the Isle of Wight, maybe kind of 10 to 12 years after that. And I remember saying to my dad, I was like, oh, there's going to be loads of splats on the thing again, watch. And then got out of the car, literally waiting for the ferry, and there was nothing, or like a handful. It's like, oh, well, how can that happen? And obviously, now that I'm a bit older and a bit wiser, I understand the reason why it happened. But yeah, you'd trust me when I say you'd rather see lots of dead bugs on your window than not, because yeah, just the kind of the knock-on impact of that.
And finally, Evan, if anyone wants to sort of get in touch, follow your work, where
Hmm.
can they find you?
Um, so I'm on, I think LinkedIn is the main place where I talk about stuff now. But I'm also on Twitter. On Twitter, I've started kind of moving towards talking a lot about the things that I've been doing on there. Um, my issue is that I'm a very off-grid person. Um,
Also,
just yeah, not for any real reason. I like getting away from technology. That's why I'm always in the middle of fields. Um, but you know, if somebody wants to find me, please do come and find me, because I would always be willing to talk about bugs. I always will. There'll never be a time when I don't want to have a conversation about fun stuff that you can do with bugs. It's like you said before. It's just popped into my head. So I'll apologize. I am neurodivergent if I'm bouncing around random topics.
so nothing wrong with that.
um,
No problem at all.
but when you'd mentioned about what people can actually do to do things. So obviously, yeah, you can listen to me talk about it. You can listen to other people talk about it. There's lots of fantastic people. Paul Hetherington from Bug Life, very, very eloquent gentleman, talks about lots of cool stuff. This podcast has been a lot of great people on it as well. But just go do some stuff yourself. Why not? Go make a light trap, with just a sheet and a torch. Go stand in a field with a sheet and a torch and look at moths. You'd be surprised how rewarding it is, because I think the nice thing with invertebrates is that, unlike vertebrates where, excuse me, you might, I don't know, say you fish, right? You might go fishing, you're there for 6 hours, you catch nothing, or you catch one fish and you're like, oh, cool, great, that was fantastic. But the kind of the instant gratification you get when you've got a moth light trap and you've been standing there for, I don't know, an hour, and you get this big gigantic beast appear on the sheet. It's the same feeling, just people don't seek it for whatever reason. Finding the stuff is great. Taking photos of bugs is great, even just for the point. I mean, I had my partner's mom here earlier, and I was just like, look at this photo, and it was a giant crane fly larvae, a leather jacket, horrible beast. And even if it's just for the satisfaction of somebody gets freaked out by it, the more times you do that, the more likely people are going to start going, oh, actually, that's, yeah, you know what, that's quite interesting.
Mm.
But yes, if anybody wants to find me, please do. I work at East Durham College in um, County Durham. I've got an email address which is literally just my first name dot my second name at eastdurham.ac.uk. Please find me on there. But yeah, anyone wants to talk? I want to. I don't know if you can tell, but
Evan, thank you so much for your time.
no, you're very welcome. Thank you for inviting me.